It's even said that the Minutemen were racist. That, you know, Captain Metropolis tells him that he's okay with him being black or whatever and fucking him, but like he needs to continue to wear the white makeup, so that none of the Minutemen know, because they're just not that understanding. So it's like, okay, the Minutemen are racist as fuck. You're racist as fuck because you just want to fuck black niggas, but you don't want to actually be down with black people. What up, everybody? It is your boy Jabbar back again with another video, and welcome to my channel, Kakashi Cowboy Reviews, where I do social, artistic, and cultural critiques. But I do want to do a review on the Watchmen series. I really had been wanting to do this before Christmas, but it just didn't work out that way. But I'm gonna do this by theme, actually. But before that, I do want to talk about the Watchmen canon in terms of the history of, I don't know if they call it a comic book. I've seen some people call it a comic book. I've seen some people call it a graphic novel. I don't really get what the fuck the difference is. If you don't know anything about Watchmen at all, because you will need to know a little bit about the Watchmen canon before going into this series. Superheroes have no powers, essentially. They're all kind of Batman-like or Batman-ish. And the whole sort of universe and the whole inception of Watchmen was supposed to be based off of the fact of like questioning just like the value of superheroes and what they bring to the table and how they affect the world. So there's Rorschach, there's the comedian, there's Ozymandias, there's Silk Spectre, and then there's Dr. Manhattan. And Dr. Manhattan is the only one who has real powers. Dr. Manhattan got his powers by accident by getting caught in some type of he got caught by accident in some type of chamber or whatever, and he was given all of these powers, sort of like these godlike powers. And he's blue. We already know his like aesthetic is blue. Rorschach, his vigilantism is very black and white, which is going to be very important based on his perception of what good and bad is. There is no gray. Like, everything is just either you're good or you're bad, and if you're bad, he's going to kill you. The comedian turns out to be he's a vigilante who sort of is corrupt. He helps, I think, Nixon win the presidency or something like that, and is in some type of like scandal. I think he's involved in the Watergate scandal, but he helps cover up the Watergate scandal in the comic books. So he changes the course of history, essentially, and Nixon becomes the president. And then actually Ozymandias helps Robert Redford, who I don't know if anybody knows who Robert Redford is, but he's an actor, which is actually kind of funny that an actor did become president. Essentially Reagan became president, and then now we have reality star show host who's president. Dr. Manhattan wins the Vietnam War for America, so he changes the course of history that way as well. All of this stuff, all of this canon is going to somehow transfer into how we get into this HBO series. There's two Silk Spectres. The one was the mother of Laurie Blake. Laurie Blake is going to be in this new season. Her mother was the first Silk Spectre. She got raped by the comedian. Laurie Blake is actually the product of rape. That is actually referenced in this new season as well. Her and her mother, I think, both had a relationship with Dr. Manhattan. An intimate relationship, which is kind of weird. Dr. Manhattan has always had an issue with relationships and getting involved in human relationships with women. Because he is also this kind of godlike figure, it also enables him to sort of dote on the inaneness of like human emotion and what they feel and the feelings and the stuff like that. Like, he doesn't really get it a lot, trying to figure out how he can love somebody, and that is going to be another theme that also carries over into this season. So this season of Watchmen really wants to transform it and talk about race. Really, so in this universe that they're creating, this new Watchmen universe, Rorschach dies. He ends up, figuring out all of this. He ends up like coming to terms with his own morals and his own code of ethics and morals, because the people he thought was good weren't good, and the people he thought was bad weren't exactly the bad. And so his whole idea of black and white gets confused, and so I think he ends up killing himself in the comic books. In this universe, so Rorschach is still dead. He sort of becomes a martyr for pretty much a KKK movement. Essentially, they take his idea of black and white, justice sort of literally. They go around and they wear the Rorschach mask. So if you don't know, the Rorschach mask is those masks where it's like a white background and there's like this black like ink blot sort of thing going on, where you're supposed to, like, usually a therapist or somebody tells you, what do you see? So they wear this because like Rorschach is like their hero. They're pretty much the new KKK. Actually, the first scene of Watchmen, we see the cop pull over this white guy who's blasting future music. He actually turns out being in this group they call themselves 7K, and it turns out that they actually are descended from the actual KKK or this other group called Cyclops. Like, there's a lot of scenes like this where they're sort of introducing this idea of appropriation. People also a lot of times think that, like, oh my goodness, appropriation is a sign of admiration, and it's just not. And this scene, and there's little scenes like that prove that so well. That 7K is trying to capture Dr. Manhattan and use his power to take over the world and take their rightful place as white men, because white men have it so hard. This guy, he's blasting because he gets pulled over by a black cop. And it's so funny and it's just like the dynamic switch is just so, like, the tension is very heavy in the scene. He's blasting future music. It's like, okay. New universe, Robert Redford ends up giving black people reparations for slavery. And I just have to give kudos to the writers for going there. So a lot of white people who are upset about this throw it in black people's faces that, they only got their money by handout, which I think is just funny because, like, isn't that how you got your money? And reparations isn't a handout. Like, people work for free, and this is just reparations is literally the repayment of that free labor. Angela goes at her kids' school, teaching them how to cook and how to bake and stuff. She finds out that she's a retired cop, even though she's not really retired. She is a vigilante, but she does that on the side while she also takes care of her kids, who are adopted. Who she adopted from her other partner who got killed. The little kid in the classroom, because she says is opening a new bakery. The bakery is just a front for her, like, superhero lair, essentially, where she, like, her car is and her outfit is and her devices are. The white kid says, you got that from your reparations or whatever. And then her adopted white child, ends up starting to beat up the other white kid. I did not like myself the fact that she had white children. I just felt like there was no reason for it. Like, I just don't understand why her partner couldn't have been black. We don't get any sort of other mention of her partner other than that he was killed. Like, we get so few representation of, like, good, like, loving and caring family dynamics between black people in media. And, like, the one time we start to get this, like, we see this mother and father, because she's married to Regina King is married to her character Angela is married to Yahya Abdul Mateen the second. They're being so loving and caring towards these children, and it's just like, well, I don't understand why these kids couldn't be black unless they're going to continue, because they don't really mention the partner at all. I don't know if he's going to come into effect later. I don't know if the kids are going to have a bigger. I just don't know what the point of it was. Like, what was the point of having the kids that she adopted be white? I think it was supposed to be this all lives matter, love is love type of thing. But to me, it was just a missed opportunity because it was just this very nice, loving, warm household, but we didn't get to see it with black children in it. So we find out, I'm just going to go ahead and do spoilers. Regina King's husband turns out to be Dr. Manhattan in disguise. They do a flashback scene in one episode where, how they met. So Dr. Manhattan, I guess we learned that he experiences time differently, which I thought was really well done. The whole fact that he experiences time, like he experiences the past, the future, and the present all at the same time. Regina King Angela grew up in Vietnam because her father was stationed there. Her father and mother was stationed there. Her father was an army person. Also, to go back to the canon and the source material, remember that Dr. Manhattan is the reason why America won the Vietnam, and so there's a lot of hatred towards the American soldiers by the Vietnamese people. The boy ends up blowing up, doing a suicide bomb attempt as they're like having this family day, having this army family day. Vietnamese boy decides that he's going to, death to America essentially, and death to colonizers, and death to colonialists. So her father and mother end up, while she's looking at the Sister Night DVD that she asked her father to get for her so she could watch, because she likes it and she likes her. She thinks she's a strong black woman, and she, it's just implied that she looks up to this figure who she will later then model herself after. Her father and mother end up getting, they are in the crossfire of the bomb and they get blown up. And so she becomes kind of an orphan, and she's stuck over there in Vietnam by herself. Angela, later on in life, also becomes a police officer in the army that her father worked for in Vietnam. And I guess for whatever reason, Dr. Manhattan is, I guess he's just called down there to her. He just, for some reason, is interested in her. She thinks she has a pure heart and a good heart, and she's a good person. In Vietnam, they idolize Dr. Manhattan. They act like he is God. I'm going to actually get into that aspect as well. Dr. Manhattan being God as a theme. Him and Regina King build a relationship together, and then he decides that he wants to, he asks her, because they want to go off and they want to live, a life together. He can't do that if he's blue. So he's like, who should I take the form of that you like? Sort of go to a morgue. And she first picks out these white guys. And he's like, are you sure? Like, he's sort of looking at her like, you don't want me to be these guys. You're not attracted to them at all. They're like these old white guys. And she was like, well, it just makes sense because, they have no tags and they have no, family and all this stuff like that. They're kind of loners. And she was like, well, I think that whoever I become or whoever I change myself into, you should, be attracted to. She's like, okay, well, I'm going to go over to get this black guy that she finds really attractive. I don't think that people understood the how powerful that moment was, to have this godlike figure make himself a black man. Like, it was just kind of like, holy shit, God creates himself out of a black man's image. Like, I just thought that was like, whoa. Also, the fact that God is in love with the black woman, that's also very powerful imagery and very, very powerful symbolism as well. And that alone is a reason to watch. So people are praying to Dr. Manhattan. People have set up like these little phone booths type of things that sort of, because it's assumed that Dr. Manhattan is on Mars. They essentially have set up this sort of phone booth that sort of has this like telecommunications to Mars, and like people go in and they pray, and we see actually Lori Blake pray to Dr. Manhattan a lot, and we find out at the end that he actually listened to those prayers. And Angela and him talking, she was like, why don't you answer them or whatever, and he was kind of like, if I answer them, people pray for selfish things essentially, and I've already done that before. I've already answered sort of prayers, because he did the Vietnam thing. He defeated the Vietnam for America. But he found out that like, if I answer these people's prayers, that might have a negative adverse effect on these people over here. And so he just decided to stay out of it, because everybody's praying for selfish reasons and for selfish things that have nothing to do with the betterment of humanity. And I just thought that was I thought that was so powerful. The fact that, this idea that maybe God doesn't answer our prayers because they're not worth answering. First part of appropriation, so one of the first scenes is of the Tulsa riot. I said Tulsa riot. Tulsa massacre. The Tulsa riot is what they fucking call it, even though it was a massacre where a white mob came in and killed a whole bunch of black business owners and black townspeople, and bombed and burned and shot, and we get to see this all happening. I thought it was tastefully done. I don't think that it was done in a very like, we saw enough that we needed to see, but we didn't see so much that it was like, it was traumatic. I don't think. I think it was tastefully done. I think because we needed to see it because nobody talks about it. So we needed to see it. And I think it was important for us to see it, but at the same time, I thought it was very tastefully done. We didn't spend too much, like they cut very quickly in and out of the scenes. So even when somebody would get shot, it would cut quickly to something else, or it would cut quickly to this. We didn't. I remember one point, I think there was a child holding a dead baby, but it was very quick. It was like a second. We only got to see it for a second. We didn't really get to see a close up of it. They didn't focus in on it. They didn't focus in on black people being shot or their faces or anything like that. So it wasn't. It was something that we needed to see because we haven't seen before, but it wasn't overly done. But before that, we see Angela's. We find out that that's Angela's grandfather. He's like 105 years old in the present day, but he was a part. He lived through the Tulsa massacre. His father was a soldier that just got back from World War One, I think it was, and they had planned to escape, but his mother and father don't make it out. His mother is actually still, she played the piano for I think, what are they called, speakeasies? It was just these movies where somebody would play a piano and play the music, and then on the screen it would be running, and then there would be like subtitles, but there wouldn't be any sound. It would be in black and white. So he's sitting there watching the film as the bombings are going on outside. His mother's playing the piano like she always does. They're waiting for their father to come and get them. And it turns out that there's this black sheriff, and he's getting this white racist guy who's been harassing townspeople. And it's revealed that it's Bass Reeves. And I don't know if people know who Bass Reeves is, but Bass Reeves was a famous black sheriff in the Midwest. Bass Reeves, his likeness was taken and created and put into being the Lone Ranger. We see, him, Angela's grandfather, looking up the same way Angela looked up to Sister Night. He's looking up at Bass Reeves, and he's like, I would love to be him. And so we end up finding that Angela's grandfather, was the first ever vigilante superhero, Hooded Justice. In the Watchmen canon, Hooded Justice is the first vigilante superhero that ever lived. He sort of inspired the Minutemen, who were the first superhero. They were sort of like the Justice League kind of. Hooded Justice and Captain Metropolis have a sexual relationship, so they are gay, which is going to come in later on in terms of when Angela takes her grandfather's nostalgia pills. I wasn't exactly sure how they worked. That was one thing that I didn't like, is that they never really explained how nostalgia pills worked. It's just sort of like a magic pill you take. Angela takes her grandfather's nostalgia pills, and she gets all his memories essentially from the past. She finds out that he was Hooded Justice. In the Watchmen source material, the canon, the comic books, it's never said that his identity is never revealed. We never know if he is, we never know his real name or anything like that. So I guess what the writers in this series did was they took that and they sort of adapted it. I feel like it's just layers on layers on layers. So Bass Reeves, his likeness was taken and created into a white man, which was the Lone Ranger. And so we're sort of doing the same thing, where they are saying that Hooded Justice was taken and developed into a white guy as well, even though he was originally a black man. Angela's grandfather, who was played by Louis Gossett Jr., when he was younger and they bombed the town and they were trying to escape, he gets thrown because of a bomb blast that happened or whatever. Because he's leaving with another family, because his family couldn't go, they couldn't all fit in the carriage. So that family had a child or a baby, and they get thrown, I guess they die, the parents die in the blast, but they get thrown into a field. So he and his baby go up to New York, because I guess she's still there. He ends up marrying the little girl he raised. It's a little pedophile-ish. I feel like we could have done something a little different. A little creepy. This is a little bit like grooming, grooming somebody from birth, from a child. It's just a little nasty. They got married or whatever. He becomes a police officer. She tells him that he's angry. Angela's grandmother, essentially, that came to get her. This is the past now. We're in his memories. She tells him that he's angry and he needs to figure out the source of his anger and what he wants to do about it. So he tries to confront a white guy who burned down a Jewish shop, essentially. He tries to take him in to arrest him. And essentially, this creates trouble for him because all of the other police cops and stuff, they're all in this sort of 7K, KKK, the Cyclops. They call them Cyclops. Back in the day, they weren't 7K, they were Cyclops. They were all in this sort of organization, this KKK organization together. And so what ends up happening is that when he ends up trying to take the guy in for burning down the Jewish shop, his white police buddies drag him to a tree. I really love how this scene is done. I think this is also done very tastefully. It's almost as if we're seeing this through our eyes, as if we are him. So it's almost like they are talking to us and we're the ones getting hung up. So they put a hood over his head, they wrap the noose around his neck, and they tie him up. But it's almost like we're being lifted up, and we're like, it goes black because the hood comes up over our head and the rope goes around our necks. And we can sort of, the camera is sort of being lifted up, but it sort of feels like we are being lifted up and we are being strangled as the audience member. And I really, really loved how that was done in the movie. I mean, in the series, in the show, because it really gives every audience member, whether black or white, the experience of being hanged by somebody and almost experiencing death. They're really doing some really interesting things. Like, they're just not being boring in terms of the way they use the camera and cinematography. Like, they're really getting creative in this series, and I really, really love it. From the writers, I mean, there's some points I don't like, but from the writing to the cinematography, everybody is on point. So after that, he sort of gets angry and he goes on this sort of vigilante run with the hood. He keeps wearing the hood and the noose, essentially, and he helps this couple out that's being harassed by these robbers or whatever, and these thieves, and sort of like that's how he gets his sort of name out there. His wife also helps him hide his identity by putting white around his eyes so they think he's a white man, and white around his wrists. So that's how people thought that they explained the fact that people thought that he was a white guy, and Captain Metropolis and the Minutemen thought that he was a white guy. Captain Metropolis is pretty much a fucking liberal racist. I guess him and the Minutemen see him and they're like inspired by him or whatever, and they come. And Captain Metropolis comes to his house and he's like, I think you know who, Hooded Justice is. And if you can get us in contact with him, that would be great. So they're sort of doing this tongue-in-cheek thing where, like, we know who each other is, essentially. But then it immediately switches to them having sex. And it's just sort of like, where the fuck did this come from? Like, how do we go from them having conversation about them knowing each other's secret identities to they're just having sex? Like, we just jump. There's no like relationship build up or no nothing. It's just immediate. And also, he's racist. But Captain Metropolis is racist. They portray him as being racist as fuck. Like, he's okay with being around black people or around him when he wants to fuck him, but he doesn't really want to help him in terms of taking down the KKK. Racist. He doesn't care about black people at all, and he lets it be known to him. And also they set it up the fact that Angela's father is also very distrustful of white people. So I don't understand. So you set up to where Captain Metropolis is racist. The guy who really Hooded Justice is black, is distrustful of white people. But for some reason, he gets in a relationship with Captain Metropolis. Like, they had to have explained this a little bit better. Or they needed to come up with another alternate reasoning. They needed to come with another alternate reasoning. But the storyline don't make no sense. He's racist, and the father doesn't trust white people. So how were they going to ever get together? It doesn't make no sense. It's even said that the Minutemen were racist, that, Captain Metropolis tells him that he's okay with him being black or whatever and fucking him, but, like, he needs to continue to wear the white makeup, so that none of the Minutemen know, because they're just not that understanding. So it's like, okay, the Minutemen are racist as fuck. You're racist as fuck because you just want to fuck black niggas, but you don't want to actually be down with black people. I also thought they were trying too hard to create this dynamic where, you know, superheroes have secret identities and having to be in the closet. I thought they were trying to be too tongue in cheek with that. Like they're trying to like create this sort of like parallelism of like sexual identity and that fact that people have to be in the closet and hide who they really are. I like the Superman references. We get that Angela's grandfather runs into this guy at a magazine stand, and they're selling this comic books or whatever, and the guy's reading the comic books, and Angela's grandfather asks sort of like, what are you reading? And he said it's about this guy who had to leave his home because it was bombed. And essentially it's sort of parallel to like Angela's grandfather's story, because his home in Tulsa was also bombed and he had to leave as well. He had to leave home because it wasn't safe. This with Lady True. So Lady True is Ozymandias' daughter, and she also has a plan to try to take Dr. Manhattan's powers and also kill off all of the races. Lady True goes to this couple and she hands them a baby because they were not able to have a baby. They're sort of this sort of country, sort of like Kansas type of people. They live on like this farmland. Something is going to land in the field, and Lady True sort of says, okay, I made a baby for you guys out of you guys' DNA. You can have this child that you haven't been able to have naturally as long as you sign over this land to me, and then you have 30 seconds. And so they end up signing the thing over, and so they get the child, and then something lands in their field, which is also another Superman reference, you know, that a child lands in their field or whatever, which sort of is like the Clark Kent story. Dr. Manhattan himself is supposed to be a reference to Superman. I was really liking that, you know, those Superman references in there. I thought they were well done, well placed. They weren't like overly done, like, hey, this is a Superman reference. It was just like, you know, this is a Superman reference. And you just sort of, either you got it or you didn't. I really liked how like they explained that, you know, Dr. Manhattan was trying to create life on Europa. So it turns out that Dr. Manhattan created life on Europa. There's actually a joke and pun put in there about Angela saying like, because he created it in like under 2 minutes, and she was like, just like a man, you know, creating life in under 2 minutes, ha ha ha. But essentially he created life on Europa, but it sort of bored him. They just lived to sort of, you know, please him or whatever, or worship him. Him and Ozymandias sort of had this deal where he, you know, sent him to live on Europa, because I guess, Ozymandias, after sort of sending the world into disarray, like Ozymandias kills 3 million people because he wants to stop the Cold War from happening. So there's a Cold War brewing. And this is also in canon as well, that Ozymandias builds this machine that sends this like intergalactical squid that kills he drops it on New York, I think, and he kills like 3 million people. So he does this so that America and Russia will stop trying to fight each other and fight the squid, and it works. Is Ozymandias a bad guy, or is he a good guy? And what is the line between good and evil? Going back to the whole Rorschach thing, like what is the line between good and bad? Is it black and white? Like, yes, Ozymandias creates this sort of like peace, like at what cost? Like 3 million people had to die. You know what I'm saying? Like it seems like he's just kind of like into just murdering people and then sort of just backing it up with, I did it for the greater good. He's supposed to be so smart, but he can never find any way, you know, he can never find a way to like save people without killing everyone else. So it turns out that Lady True is actually Ozymandias' long lost daughter. She sort of becomes just like him, trying to, you know, get, you know, all of this power because they think that they could do so much more with it than Dr. Manhattan. She ends up finding a way to like transfer the power safely into herself. And so Ozymandias essentially drops squid on her before she can do that, even though it's probably going to also hurt a lot of other people, not just kill her. Like he just doesn't care. Laurie Blake and Looking Glass, another superhero vigilante in this series. They arrest him at the end, even though he's like, I've just saved the world. I just saved the world. How could you ever, lock me up? And they're like, bitch, like, you killed a whole bunch of people. Another great insight was, before I wrap this up, because this is getting really, really long, while Ozymandias is on Europa sort of living, the life that Dr. Manhattan had created for himself with all of these sort of like Adam and Eve type character, Ozymandias, we find out that he sort of became got crazy on there because there was too much peace. There was never any conflict. And so he ended up creating sort of conflict with one of the first or original clones. So so the entire time of this whole series, they're sort of battling it out or whatever, or constantly fighting. And at the end, we find out that Ozymandias could have left at any time. He created a challenge for himself by making an enemy with, out of this clone, because he said it kept him sane. And it almost makes us think about, like, is peace really what we want as human beings? Or does a little chaos keep us sane and intact? It's just really crazy to think about, but like, does a little chaos keep us, like, together and down to earth? Or at least it does for, these vigilantes like Ozymandias and Angela and them. We leave this season off with, like, apparently Dr. Manhattan has left some of his power in an egg. Him and Angela have this fight over, like, he sort of starts the conversation off with, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And she goes back and she finds the egg not broken that she smashed. And she goes and she eats it. And I guess she goes and tried. The last thing we get is her trying to walk on water. I don't know if this is going to get picked up for a second season, but I really enjoyed the ride. Whether it gets picked up for a second season or not, I really enjoyed the ride that we went on with this whole thing. I really enjoyed. They really pulled out all the stops. They really said, like, fuck it. Like, we're going to go all the way. We're going to be full-throated. Like, and even though they didn't get everything right, and even though I have some issues with it, I really can't be mad at this season. Like, this is nothing is perfect, but this is damn near close. Like, comment, subscribe, and tell me what you think about it. Let me know if you watched it, if you liked it, if you're going to watch it after this. But yeah, if you're looking forward to a second season, if you know that if there's gonna be a second season, if they've already announced it. But yeah, I will see you all next time for the next video. Thank you.